Hi guys, it's Kelly here, and I'm back with another video for Honeybee Stamps. Today I am going to be using the Hello Sweetheart Stamps and Dies, He Is Risen Stamps and Dies, and the Old Rugged Cross Stamps and Dies. Now, we recently did a card with two of these stamps and die sets for Easter, but today I actually am making some First Communion cards. So I have added, the addition is the Hello Sweetheart set, which I still love. I've used it multiple times. But I just wanted to do some really quick watercoloring. I was making a card for my goddaughter who has had her First Communion, and then my sister's other half, Jerry, he also needed one for someone in his family. So I was like, that's cool. I'll just make them the same thing, just switch up the colors. So in order to, when I look at a lot of Holy Communion cards, there's usually a lot of white, a lot of gold, and so I kind of wanted to tip my hat to that a little bit, and so I'm working on Canson Monteval watercolor paper, but I am going to be heat embossing in gold. So I am just stamping these down using the clear embossing ink from Honeybee Stamps, and then you can see I never clean my stamps, or at least I don't clean them very well, and so they're a little bit dirty, but it's fine because my embossing powder is going to cover all that up, so I'm not even going to stress about it. So I'm going to put that on there. You can see I am reusing, like, I don't know if you guys think that I'm kidding when I say that I'm cheap, but I am cheap, and I like stretching my supplies. So previously I had stamped, I think we did it a couple of weeks ago, the Wildflower watercolors, and the no-line watercoloring. And so I had stamped them on the back of this watercolor paper that I am using today. I had stamped them there, and I didn't end up using as many flowers as I thought I was going to. And so I'm just reusing the paper because the other side is still perfectly good. I'm going to die cut them out. Nobody will ever know that those are stamped in embossing ink on the back there, or I'm sorry, no line coloring ink on the back there, because once we die cut them and adhere them to the card, it will be behind. So I'm not worried about it. Here, I've covered everything up with my gold embossing powder, and now I'm just heat setting that until it's all melted. Part of the reason that this type of card is such a quick and easy watercolor is because of that heat embossing. Because it kind of separates each individual section into like its own little well. And that way you can do, like, you still have this super solid outline and things aren't running all over the place. Because the embossing is raised, it kind of keeps the colors in their own little areas. I hope that makes sense. So I'm also going to be stamping and heat embossing my sentiments, as well as the like the swag portion of the cross. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm going to show you how I did it in case you decide you want to do something similar to the design that I've used today, but I ended up not using it because I did not care for the way that it looked in the final card. But that doesn't mean that if I had chose a different color combination that it wouldn't have looked fine. It just didn't look good with the particular colors that I chose to use. And that's on me. So I'm going to be using my Karin Brush Pro markers again. These are so easy. They're so easy to use because I love that I can put color down and it blends out totally seamlessly. And then I can go in once it's wet and still use the marker on the wet areas, and it still produces pigment that is noticeable. So here, first things first, I'm putting down the brown where I want it to be the darkest, and then I'm going in with just clean water and spreading that out. I'm going to go back in with the tip to tip method, or just take a wet paintbrush to the tip of the marker, and you can drop in more pigment that way. Even though that normally will work for me, this particular time it wasn't adding enough pigment, and so I just took the marker directly to the paper in the areas that I wanted it to be the darkest. I then also kind of stretched that out along the wood grain so that some areas would be darker and some areas would be lighter. And it worked really, really well. So once that is done, I am going to show you how I did the swag portion. I chose to do it in a bright purple. And I really just added which is what I do with all of my watercoloring. I just add the color in the parts that I want to be the darkest. So in the corner and then kind of where it bows down where the fabric would be collected. And then I add the darker, I add the clean water into the middle and then pull that out to the pigment so that I have darker and lighter areas. If you start where there is pigment, and then try to pull that into the clean areas, you're not going to have any color variation. Speaking of color variation, here's how I did the flowers. So fast. So I love color variation. That's just me. This will totally work with one color, by the way, but I like it to be different. So I put down both of my colors together. I did not put them on top of each other. For this particular one, I used the pale orange and the pale pink. And so I put down the pink first. I would put down the orange just above that. I would blend them out with the clean water, starting with the clean water on the white areas and then bringing it down to the pigment. And then once that was done, and mind you, this is very little water. It's very controlled. I would go back in with the pale pink because I wanted that to be my dominant color. And then I would lay the marker down just where I wanted to add the shading. And it works beautifully every time. Super happy with the way that this comes out, where you can achieve dimension, but it doesn't take me hours like it does with normal watercolors, where I have to keep layering the color and going back over it to get the dimension that I want. There is something that is very beautiful about that type of watercoloring, but because I have a 6-month-old baby, sometimes I can't always spend that much time on it right now, and so I'm really loving the results with this super fast way of doing it. And as long as you pick 2 colors that are close together on the color wheel, so like I did pink and orange, and the next one you'll see I did orange and yellow, but you could also do like a blue and pink, a blue and purple, a pink and purple, a red and an orange, a red and a yellow. Like, as long as you're picking guys who are neighbors on the color wheel, you shouldn't have any issues getting really good results with this. I will tell you that when I tell you like it's minimal water, we've talked about this before in other watercolor videos, I like to have a more controlled, I just like more control when I'm doing watercoloring of specific images. That's just my preference. If you wanted it to be more loose and less like specific with your shading, you could just scribble your color down all over your flowers, add water, let them water do the work, and let them, kind of mix it up themselves, and you would still get beautiful results. It would just be different results than what you're seeing here. When you're using just the little bit of water, you do have to work fairly quickly with adding the shading in, because if once the water dries, if you try to go back in and add the shading, you're going to have a hard line. So the way that I get minimal water is I've practiced this enough that I know how much water I need to pick up. But before I practiced all of that, I would just pick up water like I normally would. I put my whole paintbrush in the water, and then I would use a paper towel to blot the base of the bristles, not the tip of the bristles, the base, because that's where all the extra moisture is. You need moisture on the tip to blend the colors, but you don't really need that extra in the bottom when you're doing controlled watercolor. So that's what worked for me. I did not do any variation of colors on the leaves because I didn't think it was necessary. There's kind of a small area. If I was going to do a variation on the leaves, I would have done a green and a yellow, or maybe a green and a blue. This particular set, I have the Brush Pro markers that I have are the basics set and the skin tones set. I have those two. And the basics has a really pretty teal in there that also would have worked very well. Here you can see where we've sped up the watercoloring, so you could see both of them in their entirety. I chose a little bit of a cooler brown for this cross, but I'm doing the same thing that I did with the first one. The only part I skipped was the tip to tip method because it didn't really work for me the first time in this particular card. So then once that was done, I moved on to the flowers. I'm going to do them the same way that I did before, except this time we're using the orange and the yellow. These are both from the basic set. And then the orange is going to be my shading. I'm going to go back in and add that in. If it adds too much pigment and you feel like it's not blending the way that you want, then by all means, just go back in there with a slightly damp paintbrush and just kind of run it over the areas that aren't blending, and it will help them blend by just adding that little bit of moisture back again. But that isn't always necessary. That's just kind of a way to fix it if you're not happy with the way that it's blending. I did notice that I had to do that more with this particular color combination than with the first color combination. And I don't know if that's just because the orange was so vivid, it was kind of taking over the yellow. I'm not really sure why that was, but that was the case. I did end up having to kind of blend it a little bit more, but it was still less time consuming than the amount of time that I spend on a regular watercolor piece. So with that said, like I said, these are for the First Communion. And while this particular set is not, it's called He is Risen. It's obviously an Easter set, but I'm such a fan of getting more for your money because we all work really hard for our money. We're making investments. We want to be able to use those things at multiple times, and Easter is only one time of year. This particular set, though, does have other sentiments in it that can be used for other things: sympathy cards, encouragement cards, thank you cards. But it's also nice for things like this where maybe, like for me, I don't have a lot of Catholics in my family. And I think, does Lutheran do first? I think Lutheran does First Communion too. But like, so this is not a card that I would need to make very often. My best friend was raised Catholic. She had 1 minute in her life where she thought maybe she was the atheist, and then she came back to being Catholic. And so she's raised her daughter in the Catholic Church. I had a different experience. My father was raised Catholic. My mom was raised Baptist. So Graham was Baptist. Graham always took me to a Baptist church. My mother always took me to a Baptist church. But it was very much encouraged in my family for us to kind of go to different churches and come to our own decisions about what worked for us. And so my oldest sister is Baptist, even though she's the only one of us who ever made her First Communion or confirmation. And my middle sister and I were both baptized Catholic, but I never went to, like, we call it PSR. I never went to the classes. I never made my First Communion. I have been to Catholic services, and I have been to them as a child and as an adult. I've also been to Lutheran, Protestant, Christian, non-denominational. It was just encouraged for me to kind of go and see what I felt like was the best fit for me, which I'm very grateful for because it exposed me to a lot of different, even though like the base core of the beliefs are the same, there's a lot of nuanced differences. And plus I got to meet a lot of people and be involved in a lot of different communities. And so I'm very grateful for that because it led me as an adult to making my own decisions and being very comfortable and confident in my faith. So here, now that everything's been die cut out, I just want to show you what it looks like when I put it together. And I really did not love the bright purple with the background. It just, everything felt like there was too much of it. And I know that I'm more of a minimalist when it comes to my card making designs, that I like something that's a little cleaner and a little simpler. But if you like the way that looks, then by all means, I would encourage you to do it. You know, I love when you guys make your cards your own, because you don't owe anybody anything and it's your card and you can do any way you want it to. So I decided that I liked them. My original intention was to put the cross in the center, but the size of the heart and the cross was just too similar. So I did like them much better offset, and so that is how I made them. And then I kind of just staggered the sentiment so that everything fit really nicely on the card. So here I'm going to glue my floral heart down flat. I'm also going to glue my cross down flat, but I did pop up the sentiment on foam. So, yeah, so I just, I was sad to miss, Alexa's first communion. We were invited, but it ended up being, originally we had plans to do Mother's Day with Eric's side of the family on that Saturday, and then unfortunately my mother-in-law, came down with COVID. Thankfully, she's had very, non-severe. She's just had minimal symptoms. She said it's just like a bad cold, which we're very grateful for. And we hadn't seen her in over a week, so no exposure on our end, thankfully. So that was originally the reason we weren't going, and then we were gonna go, and then on Saturday, Peanut actually woke up and his right eye was super swollen. It was bloodshot, and it was watering. So thankfully, funny how stuff works out. Thankfully, a couple of years ago when Eric and I were dating, he actually was a Friday and his eye was bothering him. I told him, I was like, dude, it looks like it's probably an eye infection. You probably need to go. And he was like, nah, I'm good. It's fine. It'll be fine. Well, then on Saturday morning, he woke up and like it was in excruciating pain, could barely open his eyeball. And so now it's Saturday morning and we're calling all over the place to try and find a place to take him for this eye infection. So now fast forward, 3-4 years later, and I knew that this place was open because of our experience of trying to find Eric a doctor on a Saturday morning. So we were able to get in. They did say it looked like it was a bacterial infection. They were able to give him eye drops, but we couldn't get in until 11:45. So we got his eye drops, and then I had to go and fight with the insurance because, I've recently gone part-time at my job, and so now my insurance is not the same as it was before. So we were in the CVS on the phone with the insurance on a Saturday morning by this time it's Saturday afternoon, for like an hour trying to get that worked out. And finally, I just ended up paying for it out of pocket, and they're going to resubmit it after they update the file. But anywho, so it was just a crazy kind of day, and I'm sad that I missed it, but I'm hoping to give her communion card the next time that I see her, which hopefully will be soon, because Peanut's birthday is coming up. And so usually I get to, see her for that. They come out for that. So these Aurora Borealis gems, I'm totally feeling these. I love these things. And so I used them on both of the cards. And then I went in with the clear shimmer pen, and then I just went right over the flowers. I didn't really notice it moving any of the pigment around, but that's just something to keep in mind, especially if you're going from like a red to a blue or a yellow to a blue, something like that, where you might want to scribble it off so to make sure you're not transferring any pigment. But that's it. That's both cards. So thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time. I hope that you are maybe inspired to try some watercolor soon, and I will catch you guys on the next video. Bye.